Hi there, how you doing today? It's time to change the oil on the Yamaha XT 250. I've had this motorcycle, I've got about not quite 1,000 miles on it, and I'm ready to do its first oil change here. So I've laid out the things that we need here, and it should be a pretty simple process. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to go ahead and start the engine and let the motorcycle warm up. We're in a well-ventilated building. This is right behind the camera is a pretty good sized door that's open. So we're going to let this motor warm up a bit, and then we'll proceed with showing you how the best way is to service this. This is what you're going to need to complete the oil change on your Yamaha XT 250. I personally use the factory lubricants, the OEM stuff. You're free to use whatever you like. The manual recommends that the weight should be 1040 and it should be rated for the motorcycle. You can check your owner's manual for the specific ratings. I prefer the Yamalube. I'm also going to change the oil filter in this service, and that's a K&N part 140. Those are available online or at your motorcycle shop. You're going to need a 14mm socket, a 12mm socket, a couple of ratchets and extensions if you prefer to use an extension for any of these operations. You're going to also need a 5mm socket Allen, or you could probably use a regular Allen wrench if it was heavy enough. I'm not sure, since this is the first time I've ever serviced this bike and did an oil change on this bike, I'm not sure how tight these fasteners are going to be, so they could be sort of tight. I'm going to use a socket. You're going to need some solvent or a crud cutter or some type of degreaser. You're going to want a roll of paper towels. If you prefer, you might want to have a measuring device like this one that I have here, one similar, and then a drip pan. I'm also throwing a couple pieces of cardboard down under it so I don't drip anything on my floor. So we're going to complete the service here shortly. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 14mm socket. We're going to take the oil fill plug out. Set that aside. And swap out to a 12mm socket. We're going to pull the drain plug down here. Have our pan positioned to catch it. Yeah, it looks kind of black. It looks ready for a change. Give this drain plug a good cleaning, and we're going to inspect the washer. It has a copper crush washer. Some schools of thought say this should be replaced each and every time. The manual basically says to inspect it, and if it's in good shape you can reuse it. It looks fine. And oil plug looks good. Yeah, these items all look real good. So we're going to let that drain now for a little bit here. We're just going to leave it on the kickstand because it's kind of angled the whole motor over there to the side. Make sure we get as much of this out as possible. So we'll come back in a minute when it's all drained out. Okay, the next part of this procedure is to take the oil filter out. The oil filter resides behind this lid right here. There's 3 metric Allens on here. This bottom one is there's a passage drilled from here, where the filter housing is, into the motor. And what that's meant to do is to drain any oil that might be in this oil filter housing to the engine, where it can come out the drain plug in the bottom. So what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and pull that oil drain plug for the oil filter. Alright, while that's draining, I'm going to take these, I'm going to start taking this cover off. I'm going to take these other 2 Allens out. So you want to kind of keep those. This one's got a little different head on it, so you want to kind of keep that order of them, you know, so that they go back in the same holes. Make sure you get, see, that one's really long. That cover's already stuck in there. Pop loose there. There's a O-ring behind this cover, rubber O-ring. So we're just gonna very carefully pop this off, and there's your oil filter on there. Okay. Set that aside. You see that passageway that runs down from here, and it runs through where this bolt is, and that's the drain for the oil filter housing. There wasn't a ton in there, so we'll go ahead and wipe what's left in there out with a clean rag and start cleaning everything up and get ready to put it back together. So little O-rings on here too. You want to watch out you don't lose those. You have an oil leak if you lose those. All right. Okay, just pop that oil filter off of there. Now if you look at this oil filter, you can see there's definitely a difference one side to the other. If you look at this, there's a pretty large hole there, and you're looking down into the center of the filter. And if you look at the other end, there's a one-way valve. So the big end goes into here, and it won't go the other way. It can only go in one way, so you can't make a mistake on that. You just can't do it. It's impossible. So I'm going to clean this thing up. Inspect the O-ring surface here, make sure that's in good shape. It is. It's never been off, so the motorcycle is pretty dang new. But you know, really, you're always better off if you change the oil early on. You know, and I actually checked the mileage on this. I have nowhere near 1,000 miles on it. It's 390 miles. I thought I had more, but so that's not too bad. So this is basically, I'm doing this oil change as early as I am, because if there was any machining or metal that got into the motor when they were building it, then it wouldn't run around in there for quite a while before it comes out. Yeah, it's pretty dirty looking even at you know 400 miles, so that's all right. So now what we can do is take our new oil filter and put it in. Okay, so remember, we take the big side, and the big side goes on here. It's actually not going to go on, it's just going to, you know, just shove it in the hole. It's going to, the other one was a little bit stuck from being on there for a while. Okay, and then this thing here goes up to this corner up here. Okay, there, and that was our shortest bolt. Then we had the longer bolt, goes on the other side over here. And then we had the one with a different looking head on it, and that's the drain bolt for the oil filter housing. It's a pretty simple process. I mean, it's just these 3 Allens. No big deal. I'm going to snug those back up. Torque spec is like 7.2 foot-pounds. So they're not super tight, and it's a steel bolt going into an aluminum hole, so aluminum threads, so be sure you don't over tighten those when you put that back together. You'd be stripping the threads out of there. If you have a foot-pound torque wrench that goes as low as 7 pounds, you can torque them. I have one, and I'll check the torque on them here in a little bit, but not going to worry about that right now. Okay, so barely dripping at all now. So we can go ahead and put our copper crush washer back on the drain plug. We can put the drain plug back in the hole and we can cinch that down. Okay, and that's a metric 12. Okay, give that a cinch. All right, good and tight there. Now it's time to put the oil in. If you look at the side of the motor, you'll see that there's the oil fill here, and then there's a sight glass right here. And that sight glass has 4 lines, and that's the operating range. And so when you refill this with your 1.37 quarts of oil, what you'd like to see is you'd like to see oil right in the middle between the upper and lower lines, and that's the operating range. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start putting oil in here. It's always nice to you know, get an oil change done, you know. Always gives you peace of mind that there isn't a bunch of crap, filth and metal fragments flying around in your brand new motor. Alright, that's the better part of a quart right there. Okay, I've got the bike pretty level now. I'm going to take a peek in the sight glass down here, and I don't see anything on the sight glass yet. So I'm going to go ahead with my second quart, and I'm going to slowly fill that to the upper side of the operating window there. Kind of give it time to, you know, you don't want to overfill, but you want to give it time to fill, you know, for the oil to run down to the sight glass, to run down from the hole, but it's really close, so I'll go with a little bit more here. There we go. Alright, so that's going to be at about the upper limit of the operating range, right there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the fill plug back in, and I'm going to start the motorcycle, and then I'm going to recheck that level. I want it to be in between, once again, between these upper and lower marks. There's marks on both sides, 4 total. 2 upper, 2 lower. You want it to be in the middle. Not too much to this. Not at all rocket science. I'm just gonna snug that just a little bit, so I know it can't vibrate off. All right, that's pretty much all there is to it here. We're gonna go ahead and fire the motorcycle now. See oil moving around in there inside that sight glass. You can see it kind of bubbling around in there. Okay, so I've waited about 3 to 4 minutes. And going to take a peek, make sure that the bike is perfectly level. Very important. Okay, it's pretty much balancing right on its center of gravity there. And I've let that oil come back down into the sight glass out of the motor from when we test ran it right after the oil change. and that oil level is right in the middle of the operating range, so we're going to stick with that. It took us about about just what they say, about 1.4, 1.3 quarts of oil, and that oil level is perfect in the sight glass when the bike is level. So we're in good shape there. We're gonna call it good. One of the things that we're gonna do is we're gonna properly dispose of the oil. And so I've got a waste oil jug over here outside here that I'm going to dump the oil that came out of here in, and then I'm going to take that down to the auto parts store where they have a tank. We can recycle that oil. A lot of people dump it on the ground. Don't do that. It's a bad thing, and it gets down into the groundwater, and that's not a good thing. So make sure you properly dispose of your waste oil. Make sure that you don't get it on your hands. You know, it supposedly could cause cancer, and other than that, pretty simple procedure. Basically, just warm up the bike, you know, open up all the drains and get the old oil out, change the oil filter as we did, and then top it back off with the recommended oil. And that's all there is to it. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and enjoy your day.